Ladies and gentlemen, this is Javier welcoming you back to this special episode of the JN Show. Here with a little bit something different, a little bit of Ginette Renault, and Canadian viewers will know who this is. And this song is talking about going to a very high place and how beautiful it is. Though my French is not impeccable, I do know Spanish and I can understand a lot of it, a little bit of it. And the view is indeed beautiful when we realize that we can rise above that material. When we realize that as the Stoics we can go above and beyond that material realm into the personal realms, into the interior, and then realizing that there's not even an interior that's separate from the exterior, then going above that plane, above context, even above personality, and simply being able to observe and knowing that nothing on this physical plane, nothing indeed even on the mental plane, can affect you, then you can go back down into this game and play it very aptly. And you can take the right action at the right time. You can get inspiration, which is really inspiration from yourself on those higher realms. That's what we're going to go into in this AI debacle. How to overcome that, how to overcome the fears of that, and how to rapidly take hold of the opportunity that's coming down the pipeline for those who are intelligent enough and fast on their feet enough to see it. I always thought Ginette Renault was a very passionate singer, and I've always admired her work. Good music really takes you up that scale of being. It really takes you up the emotional scale. It's another tool. And how few and far between are good songs that are written these days. I have to go back to the 80s to find good music. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin in earnest to discuss again what we were discussing. And that was the aspect of physics, I believe. Everybody knows this, that the model of the atom that we constructed in our schooling, or perhaps for people older than us, I think while my generation was getting into schooling, they had this pretty much down. Whereas in the older generation, they constructed models of the atom where there were actually solid balls, and these were the electrons and the nucleus and so on and so forth, protons, neutrons, and so on and so forth. Now, the new picture of that looks like, and you can go to Joe Dispenza's work and see these pictures, and I'll see if I can pull one up here. We're still trying to figure out the tech here at The Real Javier Novoa. I am working on getting a very good program where I can make very high-quality videos, and you'll be seeing those very soon. And we can show pictures, and that we can show other videos on the videos, and so on and so forth, as well as better sound quality. But for now, my iPad is the studio. So let me see here if I can pull this up. Atom. If you read the works of Joe Dispenza, and you read the works of Bruce Lipton, you will get a very, very good crash course in physics and how it applies to spirituality. And for those of you just starting out on this journey, I would highly recommend, it's still a very good book, despite the fact that it's very dated, The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. It's a very good book that explains physics and so on and so forth. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the comparison. The classical atom, as you can see, is a few masses of material objects moving around the nucleus and so on and so forth. This, my friends, is the new model of the atom. Well, it's not very new. It's probably about 100 years, going on 100 years old now. But it really more accurately shows the trajectory and the representation of what that atom is, which is 99.999% pure space. And it cannot be predicted. When we go to the subatomic level, there is no prediction. All you have to do is look up the double slit experiment. These particles and waves do not go where we'd expect them to go. And by the way, the wave and the particle are the same thing depending on the point of view you take. They change according to the point of view that one takes. So this determinism only works when we give in to the assumption of material reality. And of course, we know from this course that the only law is that you make the law. All of the laws are according to your assumptions. So if indeed you do assume that everything is deterministic, and that some AI is going to decide who you will marry, as Noah Yuval Harari says, and you allow that and permit that, and focus and contemplate upon that, then that will be your future. And this is a very horrific future, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I'm trying to present this material, so that we can save ourselves from that film roll. But if that's what you accept and that's what you're going to believe, that's basically what's going to happen. But I'm here to explain to you scientifically, empirically, and what is my specialization philosophically, as to why it is only bad news if you allow it to be bad news. That is the paradox of the matrix, that these individuals are trying to keep you trapped in a matrix in order to try to advance their own seeming material advantages, trying to advance their own seeming material interests. But it is not a philosophic or enlightened hedonism, it is an unenlightened hedonism. It's a hedonism that gets everybody put onto the same trajectory downward into the more dense as opposed to the more spiritual levels. So, if it is all space, according to science, according to philosophy, we have this other argument, is that they didn't experiment on someone to try to prove that there was no free will. And they basically probed into the part of his brain that was responsible for moving his arm, and of course his arm moved involuntarily. And then they said, now try not to move your arm mentally. And it still moved. But on one of the attempts, he actually held his arm down. What is that has the impulse to hold the arm down? That is outside of causality. That is outside of material causality. And that is what the Stoics call that higher form of soul, or nous, or intellect. And that's what we call that higher form of intellect. And as we'll learn as we go through the course, this is, at least its center of operation, is in the pineal gland of the brain. But it is the agent. You do have agency, but you have to rise above that material. It's what they're studying now, and Bruce Lipton talks a lot about this, in epigenetics. That is, what is over genetics. Sure, genes are signaled to do certain things, and they can be signaled to do certain things based upon environment, based upon heredity, but there's another factor there, and that is what is over the genes. That is the soul or the intellect, and that can indeed supersede environment. And as we go into the deeper levels of the scale, we chose to come into this environment that does have certain aspects of matter and material that are deterministic. So the point of this whole discussion is, it's not deterministic if you will only arise above matter. And you can do that by the tools that we give to you in this course. You can do that by contemplation. You can do that by getting into alpha and meditation. And then you can go on to different film roles. Because the universe, according to physics, and Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this in his book, is just an infinite field of possibilities. But those possibilities are like film rolls, if you go according to what Vadim Zeland talks about. And it's very logical, very rationally unfolding in his book, Reality Transurfing. And that is, you can choose from an infinite number of film rolls, but once you're on that film roll, yes, the unfolding is the unfolding is materialistic and is deterministic. But you can get out of that determinism in an instant, and that's when you find your higher self and your higher mind. So, I think we've slayed the bogey of determinism. There is determinism from the point of view of material and matter, And if you're stuck in that point of view, my friends, I'm sorry for you, but we are offering here a way out of that. And that is to apply the tools to know who you are, to know that I am, and then you can arise above that causality and you can create whatever reality it is you want through your focus. The Stoics knew this, all of the early philosophers knew this, although they may not have couched that in these terms. All of the spiritualities and the mystics, whether from Christianity or from Islam, know this. So know it, my friends, and you don't even have to watch any more of this video because all of those other arguments collapse with the collapse of determinism. So yes, Mr. Harari is correct if he assumes determinism. And probably the greatest proof against determinism is that these organizations or societies, and we won't go into names, they're trying to engineer humanity by getting into the program and utilizing this determinism. But if all is determined, how could they take the decision to engineer humanity? And what is it that is making that decision and making that step and motion forward? If it is indeed deterministic, they would have no choice whether or not to do it. So therefore, they would have no control over what they're doing. So why take any action? Why do all of this hard work in order to subjugate humanity? And that's what they're trying to utilize this for, to subjugate humanity. Of course, they cannot do this. They might only be able to do it on the superficial level of material and on this film roll, which we can very quickly extricate ourselves from. So much for the deterministic argument. Now there's another fear, and it's a very legitimate fear, and that is the economic issue. So, of course, there's the economic issue that we're going to cover. Then there's the fear of loss, the fear of scarcity, losing your job, losing your business, and so on and so forth, being replaced. Then there's the fear of death and invasion, which is a very legitimate fear, a very real fear. And then there's the fear of the dissolution of the ego. And then there's fear of what comes after that dissolution, which is eternal damnation. And indeed, Harari talks about this. We're going to collapse these fears one by one using rational argumentation, rational logic. We're going to put them to rest, and we're going to give you tools to overcome these fears so that you can then clearly see the path forward and clearly see what you can do to affect your greatest benefit in the times to come. So we are going to take a quick break, and in the next segment I will start tackling the economic issues associated with AI and our way that we have to look at them in order to achieve maximal success. So my friends, I'll be right back. This is Javier with the JN Show. Don't go anywhere.